everyone, Christina here. Welcome to day one of the Holiday Card Series for 2017. The Holiday Card Series is a series of 25 videos, all featuring holiday card inspiration, and I'll be doing these every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, all the way until December 20th. So I'm using two stamp sets today for Mama Elephant. I'm using So Many Snowmen and Peaceful Wishes. And that snowman stamp set is very reminiscent of that cat stamp that I used for a card back in June, or I think it was May. So I'll link that up in the top corner if you want to check that out. Starting out with some watercolor paper. This is Fabriano watercolor paper, and it's in a block, so I do have to take it off the block. It's gummed on all four sides, so you just run a bone folder around the edges and it pulls it off the block. And I had to pull it off the block because I'm going to cut it down for my card. I'm cutting this to 3.5 inches wide by 9 inches tall. I'm going to be creating a really tall card today, but it does fit inside a regular business envelope, so there's no special envelope needed for this. I'm using the clear creative corners from My Sweet Petunia. These aid in getting your piece of cardstock, or in my case watercolor paper, in the MISTI tool in the precise placement every time. And this comes into play if you need to double stamp your image, like if it doesn't stamp well the first time. And I thought I might have to restamp this just because I'm using watercolor paper, which is very textured. But it turns out I got a really good impression this first time around. I was standing up and putting quite a bit of pressure down onto that MISTI tool. So I was able to get a really good impression. So I didn't need to stamp it twice. But if you needed to, you could definitely use those creative corners, and watch for those in the future. I'm sure I'll show them some more. So I've taken my watercolor piece that I've stamped and I've taped it down to a board. This is going to keep it in place while I do a bunch of watercoloring. Using this set of watercolors from Sakura Koi. This is their pocket-filled sketch box of watercolors. And this particular one has 48 colors in it, but there are others that only have like 12 or 24. So I'm just wetting down the top portion of my picture here, and then I'm coming in with a blue shade, and I'm going to bring a really pale color up close next to the snowman, and then I'm going to have it intensifying color as it goes to the other end. So I'm going to speed up the video here so it goes a little bit quicker, but I'm basically bringing in some more intense colors, and I also want kind of a curved C shape coming to the other end of this watercolor piece. And I do apologize, I'm losing my voice. I went out of town, and without fail, every time I travel, I seem to bring home a little bug. So the cold hasn't hit yet. I'm hoping I can be strong and push it off for a little while longer. But for now, my voice is a little bit scratchy. So I brought in some more color coming down to the bottom and wanted to make sure that there were areas that were still light. So I did kind of dry off my brush and sop up some color so that I could get some of those lighter C-shape areas. So I dried that with my heat tool and then came back in with another layer of color. This color really faded back and dried back quite a bit, and I wanted a more intense sky scene for this. So I did bring in another layer of color. If you're new to the Holiday Card Series this year, this is my 9th year doing the Holiday Card Series. So there's plenty of inspiration back on my YouTube channel. You can check that out, and I invite you to subscribe. If you are already a subscriber, make sure you hit that bell button next to the subscribe area. That will make sure that you're notified when I upload a video. So I know a lot of you are not receiving my videos in your subscription boxes or getting notifications. But I also know you like to come back for the Holiday Card Series. So just to make sure you don't miss out on any videos, make sure you hit that bell icon as well. So I'm coming in and adding a little bit of shading to all these snowmen, and I'm using just a really watered down version of the same blue shade that I used in the sky. And I wanted to make it look like it was a nighttime scene, and so the snowmen would be quite blue because of all the shade. They wouldn't be bright white or anything like it was the daytime. So I'm bringing in quite a bit of shadow, and I'm making sure that I have it underneath their heads, like up for their chin area, and then also around the sides of their head. Bringing in some additional colors to paint the accessories on all of the snowmen. I've got that green shade on those hats, and that's actually the same green that I used up in the sky. And then I brought in a nice red shade. I tend to choose reds that are a little bit more in the bluish spectrum, like a bluish red, a more cool toned red. You could definitely use more of like a tomato red that has a little more yellow in it, but I really like how this played off the other colors. So I'm painting that little bird there, and then I'm going to come in and paint all of these pipes that their snowmen have, and also their hats. I'm going to grab some orange here in a minute and paint all of their noses, which are made out of carrots, obviously. And I'm just filling in all of these other areas to make sure the entire scene is painted. If you wanted to do this really, really simply and maybe have a watercolor background but use markers for the snowmen, you definitely could. I would probably recommend stamping the snowmen on a separate piece of cardstock, coloring with markers, and then cutting out just the top edge, because that top edge of the snowman looks like it'd be fairly simple to cut out. So you could do that. You could watercolor the entire background and then bring in the markered image. And if you're hearing little bells chiming in the background, that would be Daphne playing. So it's kind of fitting for a holiday card. I did bring some little pink blushy cheeks onto the snowman. Now, realistically, I know snowmen would not have pink cheeks, but also realistically, there would not be a group of snowmen all together like this as if they were alive. So being that it's fictional, I thought it was okay to add some blushy cheeks on the snowman. So now I've got some white gouache. This is like an opaque watercolor, and I'm watering that down so it's a good consistency to splatter onto my piece here. I've got it on an acrylic block, and I'm going to hold the block over my project here and flick my brush off the edge. I just find to have a little more control like this. And if you notice, I'm not getting very many white droplets outside of my piece here or onto my work surface. I've got a couple on the side, but then I wanted some finer dots or finer splatters, so I used my fingers and kind of pinched the brush and splattered that out. And you'll notice I have a lot more now over on my work surface on my grid sheet or my grid mat, and this just shows the difference between the two techniques. But if you do like a regular splatter, it is really going to go everywhere. It's definitely not as controlled. So I hit that with my heat tool to speed up the drying process. And then I'm going to peel this up off of my work surface here. And I'm actually going to have to trim it down because that tape took up a little bit of the edge around the stamped image. So I'm going to trim this down in my paper trimmer. I just took it down to 3 inches wide by 8 3/4 tall. So it's just going to have a very small white edge around it once I get it on my card. Now taking the Peace on Earth stamp, and I've inked that up with Versamark ink, and I'm stamping that down onto my watercolor piece. And then I'm taking some antique gold embossing pad from Simon Says Stamp, which I have been using a lot recently, so I finally upgraded it to a plastic container. I only do that for embossing powders that I use quite a bit, and I was using this one so often that I decided it needed its own container. So I heat set that till it was smooth and melted, and then I brought in one of the longer greetings or longer text areas from that same stamp set, and I put that in the center, and that kind of fills the gap between the snowmen and the Peace on Earth. If you didn't want to have to do the greeting in between, or if you wanted a shorter card, you could definitely change the dimensions and have the Peace on Earth be right above the snowmen's heads. So I've got my card base here. This is going to be a finished card size of 3.5 by 9. So now that I think about it, that measurement I gave you on the watercolor piece was wrong. It was 3 3/4 wide by 8 3/4 tall. It was just 1/4 of an inch shorter in both dimensions than the finished card. So I put some foam adhesive on the back and then press that down onto the card base. And that pretty much finishes the card for today. If you wanted to, you could add some shimmer or glitter on top of the snowman's hats or onto the actual snowman, but I decided to keep it a little bit more simple. Thanks so much for watching. I will be back on Friday with day 2 of the holiday card series.